Good afternoon, and welcome to the 800 Credit Score Man Show. I am your host, Kevin King. He is I, and I am him, the 800 Credit Score Man himself. And again, thank each and every one of you for coming in and listening to the 800 Credit Score Man Show, Saturdays at 1:30 Central Standard Time. Yes, every Saturday at 1:30 Central Standard Time, except for last week. So last week I missed you guys, had a bunch of stuff going. A good reason for you to go ahead and follow me actually on social media. So if you can follow me on Twitter, I'm at creditscore_man on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook as 800 Credit Score Man. Instagram, same thing, 800 Credit Score Man. On Tumblr, 800 Credit Score Man. So you follow me there. If you follow me there, then I let you guys know that the show was going to be delayed. And who knew that it was going to be delayed an entire week? But yes, come in, listen to the 800 Credit Score Man Show, 1:30 Central Standard Time on Saturdays, all right? So again, thank you guys for coming in and listening to the show. So what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to talk about several things today. We got a really good question of the day yet again. It's good for millennials. It's good if you're a parent and your kids going off to school. It's a good question. It's from a old friend of the family, Brandon. If you've been listening to the show for any time at all, Brandon seems to be the resident question asker for us. So he asks a lot of questions, and he's been on the show plenty of times. So a question coming from Brandon out of Illinois today. And we're going to talk about some don'ts, some things that you don't want to do. And I'm going to give you guys another example. A few weeks ago, I gave you an example about one of my clients that actually improved his credit score 104 points after doing something I advised him to do. So we're going to I'm going to tell you about that example, the old example, a little bit. I'm going to mention yet another example to show you how collections actually affect your credit in a monetary way, not a monetary way, but in actual numbers. We're going to go over that as well. So, I got to give some shout outs. So I want to give this shout out first. I want to give a shout out to a very, very special listener, Bentley Michelle. She's 9 years old and she listens to the show with her dad. So I want to give you a huge shout out, Bentley Michelle. I know since you're listening to your dad, your credit score, once you hit 18, 19, which seems like a million years away, you're going to have a great credit score because you're listening with your father. And that's a great thing to hear from my listeners, that they are teaching their children as well by listening to the 800 Credit Score Man Show. So Bentley Michelle, thank you so much for listening to the show. I got to give a big shout out to my great nephew. His birthday is tomorrow. So Dante Denson Jr. goes by DJ. So happy birthday to you, DJ. And let me give another shout out to yet another relative, and that's Miles King. He celebrated birthday, turned 16. So I hate to say sweet 16 when it's a boy, but happy birthday to you, Miles, turned 16 years old. So like I was mentioning, a few weeks ago, I gave you this real life example of how one of my clients, he took the personal blueprint that I established for him. I made him what I call the blueprint. The blueprint is basically your strategy to help you improve your credit score. It's something that I do for my clients. And it's basically, the way I like to describe it is, it's a business plan, but it's a business plan for your credit. So this particular client, I developed it for him. We went through some other things. His credit score started to move in a positive light, and then he gained 104 points after he took one of the last steps, if you will, in what we had developed for him. And that step was for him to do a debt consolidation loan to get rid of those credit cards. So he took his debt utilization that we talk about all the time, took his debt utilization down from like 84, 88% down to zero, basically. So actually, I think it was at 1% for whatever reason. So he took it down to zero, well under that 30% we talk about as being the highest that you want your debt utilization. He took it down to 1%, and then he gained 104 points. All right, so he gained 104 points by doing just that one simple thing, because you know that 30% of your credit score is comprised of your debt utilization. So that's how much of the credit that you actually use on your credit cards. So that's what he was able to do. So that's one good thing that you can do for yourself if you're looking to improve your credit score. even if you have a very good credit score. You don't have to have a low credit score to have this positively impact your score. If you've got a relatively high credit score, you're in a good category or even an excellent category, but you're holding debt on your credit cards, you need to make a plan to get rid of those things. So I told you about that a couple of weeks ago. Then last week, I mentioned at least about a Facebook post, and this post actually came from Barry Johnson. Barry Johnson goes by the Loan Arranger, so he deals with mortgages. So Barry, the Loan Arranger Johnson, had posted that it didn't matter if your collection was $38 or if your collection was $38,000, you were still going to get that impact. So I warned you guys about going into collections at all. Doesn't matter what that amount is. So you have to take a look at your situation. Like I said, if you have a higher credit score and you think, well, this particular item doesn't belong to me, or I'm having a dispute with a particular company, and you're not concerned so much about them putting it on your credit report because you feel if I just lose, 50 points, then no big deal for me. Well, it goes to show you it doesn't matter if it's $400 or if it's going to be $4,000. You need to see that you're going to get that reduction in it. So it doesn't matter what the cost of it is. So try to keep things out of collection. Doesn't matter if you're going to pay them $5 a month or whatever it is, but try to keep things out of collection so it doesn't negatively affect your credit score. And not only that, the higher your score, the larger your fall is when it comes to a collection. So if I get a collection, and I've shared with you guys my credit scores. So my credit score now is an 822, it's an 807, and it's an 837 or 847, one of the two. So if I was to get a collection on my credit report right now, I would take a bigger hit. I might lose 80 points, whereas someone else with maybe a 60 maybe like a 600, 650 credit score, they may only lose 40 points on that particular collection. But the higher you are, it's kind of like the bigger they come, the harder they fall. It's kind of like that. So if you got a high score, you're going to take a bigger hit when it comes to your collections as well. So I'm going to tell you about this one particular person that contacted me, and fortunately, actually for us, not so much for this particular listener, they provided me this info, and I have a concrete example for you guys of what happens with your credit score. So let's jump into that right quick. So this particular person, this particular person sent me their credit scores for all three credit bureaus, and it's based off of a FICO score. It's actually FICO, and it's the scoring system of 8. So FICO is on 9. They're on 9.0. But this one is off of FICO 8. It's really close to 9. Not a bunch of difference between the two different versions at all. So this person actually has a couple of collections on their credit report. Now listen to me and follow along with what I'm saying. They have a couple collections on their credit report, but they have a relatively good score. So let's look at what has happened to this person's credit score and their collections. The reason I mentioned that $38 or $38,000, their collections were really small. Both of them were small. One of them was only $66. Okay, so it was only $66. And this particular person's collections are not on all three credit bureaus. So these collections, both collections are on Equifax and they're on Experian. They're on Equifax and Experian, so they're not on TransUnion. Now let's see what's the difference for this particular person. So this person's, after having these two collections, their Equifax credit score is 694. Pretty good. Pretty good. That's in the fair range. When you hit 700, you go to good. 700 to 749, you're in the good range. And then 750 and above, you're in excellent. So they're in the fair range at 694. Did I say 649? At 694 for Equifax. On Experian, where this collection, both of these collections are on his credit report on Experian as well, that score is at 680. So you got 694 and you have 680. Now, his collections are not, I repeat, they are not showing up on TransUnion. What's his TransUnion credit score? What do you think that one might be? His TransUnion credit score is 784. That puts him in the excellent range. where he's going to get the best interest rates. He'll be able to negotiate with anybody because he has such a good score. He's at 784 as compared to being at 680 on Experian and 694 on Equifax. So he has basically dropped down 2 spots. So he's in excellent, where he has no collection at all. So this is an example to show you how it can impact your credit score. So he's an excellent on TransUnion, and if he didn't have these collections, he didn't allow them, and the one is only $66, like I said, then he could potentially be in excellent on all 3 of those if he didn't have any collections at all. But he is actually in the fair range. He's in the fair range for Equifax and Experian. But on TransUnion, he has a 784, which is an excellent credit score. So that just goes to show you, that is a 100-point difference, a little over 100-point difference on Experian for having those collections hit his credit report. So now you know how that impacts your score. So if you happen to have a collection and you've got a late pay and you've got a high debt utilization, you can imagine what your scores are. They are the way they are because of those things in itself. So it's very important that you take care of any collections, and even more important, that if you can avoid going to collections at all, that's what you want to do, because it definitely will impact your score in a negative way, and it's harder to gain points than it is to lose points in the first place. So I want to make sure you guys are aware of that and do not fall into that trap. All right, so let's jump into a couple other things I want to talk to you about today. Let me do a couple of shout outs right quick. So I got Dante in. I got to shout out these 3 guys. So Charles Madewell, birthday was Monday, was on the 23rd. Jason Townsend, birthday. And then also Andre Collins. All three of these young men are on the same line in Kappa Alpha Psi. They're part of the 14 Knights of Fall of 1993, the Alpha chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi. They are my Sans. Charles was my ace. Jason was the 4, and Andre was the 6 on my line. So happy birthday to my Sans. Happy birthday, Charles Madewell, Jason Townsend, and Andre Collins. Happy birthday to you guys. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into something else I want to tell you about. Here's another example of how credit can really impact your life. I talk to you guys a lot about the score and getting better interest rates, getting a better rate on your car and getting a better rate when you go to buy a house and being approved for credit cards and all of those things. Let me tell you about this young lady and what happened to her. So this is actually a court case. This young lady actually sued an apartment complex, and not necessarily sued the apartment complex because they wouldn't approve her an apartment. She was actually trying to get a job there. So I've told you before, your credit score impacts your job. It can impact if you're going to get a promotion on your job. It impacts your insurance rates for your vehicle and for your mortgages. So not only will it impact, getting stuff, and your interest rates, is also impacting other areas of your life. So this young lady sued this apartment complex, and here's what the situation really happened. So the young lady applied for a job. She was going to be one of the rental agents at the apartment complex. She applied, she interviewed, they loved her, they wanted to give her the job. They basically said, you've got the job, let's finish out some paperwork, you've got to sign up some things, and part of that paperwork was a background test. Check. So they wanted to do a background check, which meant they were looking at maybe, like criminal stuff in the background, as well as a credit check. So when they did this, when they did their credit check on her, it came back that she had bad credit. She actually didn't have any positive trades. Trades are accounts. She didn't have any accounts that were positive on her credit report at all, and she had 6 collections that were on her credit report. So when they saw that, they had to rescind their offer to her. So in the meantime, and in between time, where she thought, I've got a job, I'm going to start on Monday or whatever day she was supposed to come in, they had to go ahead and take that back from her, and she was not able to go ahead and get that job. Now here's where the issue really comes in for her. That was really bad for her. So one of the perks of getting that job